The narrative of the angels bound at the Euphrates River is rooted in the Christian Bible, specifically in the book of Revelation. Revelation, traditionally attributed to John of Patmos, was composed around 95 AD during the reign of Roman Emperor Domitian, 81 to 96 AD. John wrote while exiled to Patmos, an island in the Aegean Sea, as part of the Roman administration's measures to control dissent within the provinces of Asia Minor. The text was directed to 7 early Christian communities in Asia Minor: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. These communities existed in cities and regions shaped by centuries of Hellenistic, Roman, and pre-Roman governance, and were part of a broader Mediterranean and Near Eastern context where the Euphrates was already a symbolically and geographically significant landmark. Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15 specifically mentions 4 angels bound at the Euphrates River. The text reads, saying to the 6th angel who had the trumpet, "Release the 4 angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates." And the 4 angels were released, prepared for the hour, day, month, and year to kill 1/3 of mankind. The passage situates these angels in a highly structured, apocalyptic framework. The precision in the specification of timing, hour, day, month, and year reflects the apocalyptic emphasis on divine sovereignty and order over cosmic and human events. The bound angels are agents of judgment, and their restraint underscores the controlled nature of their power until God's predetermined moment for action. The book of Revelation is part of a larger literary and theological tradition, classified as Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic writing emerged primarily between the 3rd century BC and the 1st century AD. In these texts, the world is portrayed as a theater of conflict between divine authority and rebellious forces, often employing symbolic numbers, celestial imagery, and precise sequences of events. Revelation is continuous with this tradition, extending motifs from earlier Jewish works, including the Book of Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC, and extra-biblical texts such as 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC. In 1 Enoch, specific angels are bound because of transgressions against God's command, and their release is set for the eschatological judgment of humanity. This literary continuity establishes a framework in which the angels at the Euphrates are consistent with long-standing theological concepts of divine order, restraint, and judgment. The identity of these angels in Revelation is limited to their functional role. The text does not provide individual names or additional biographical details. They are explicitly bound, indicating that their destructive capacity is not autonomous but entirely dependent on divine authorization. The river, identified as the Euphrates, serves as a natural and symbolic boundary. In the historical context of the late 1st century AD, the Euphrates was widely recognized as the eastern frontier of Roman political awareness. While John's original audience may have been familiar with cities along the river such as Babylon in historical memory, the river's function in Revelation is theological and apocalyptic, marking the location where divine judgment is prepared but held in restraint until the appointed time. Earlier Jewish apocalyptic literature establishes parallels to this motif. The Book of Daniel, particularly chapters 7 to 12, uses symbolic numbers, angelic figures, and precise timelines to depict the unfolding of God's plan in history. Daniel 12 verse 4, composed during the Maccabean period, c. 167 to 164 BC, speaks of a period when knowledge will increase and the end of times will arrive according to God's appointed schedule. Similarly, 1 Enoch, composed in the 3rd to 2nd century BC, describes angels who have sinned against God by revealing forbidden knowledge to humanity or transgressing divine order. These angels are bound until the time of final judgment, reflecting a direct parallel to Revelation's depiction. The textual continuity demonstrates that the concept of angelic binding and subsequent release is a well-established theological motif, not a late invention or localized legend. The specific mention of the Euphrates in Revelation also reflects historical awareness. By the 1st century AD, the river had served as a major boundary for multiple empires. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, c. 911 to 609 BC, established the Euphrates as part of its eastern frontier, incorporating fortified cities such as Nineveh and Haran. Later, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, c. 626 to 539 BC, continued this pattern, with Babylon positioned along the Euphrates as the center of administrative and military power. By including this river in his apocalyptic vision, John was situating the angel's imprisonment at a historically recognized boundary where control, order, and access were regulated and where historical human conflict had been frequent. The location thereby emphasizes both strategic and symbolic significance. The angel's role is framed in Revelation as preparatory and precise. The phrase, prepared for the hour, day, month, and year, indicates that their release is not spontaneous or contingent on human actions, but is scheduled within the framework of divine providence. This precision aligns with apocalyptic expectations that events unfold according to God's predetermined timeline. While the immediate effect described is the death of a third of humanity, the text also situates this judgment within a larger schema of escalating divine intervention structured through sequential trumpet judgments. The angel's imprisonment, therefore, is not merely punitive. It functions as part of a systematic pattern in which the apocalyptic plan is executed in stages, reinforcing both the theological principle of divine control and the narrative continuity within Revelation. Historical sources confirm the cultural and geopolitical significance of the Euphrates region. By 95 AD, the river marked a frontier area of the Roman and Parthian empires. The Parthian Empire, c. 247 BC, 224 AD, controlled Mesopotamia east of the Euphrates, maintaining fortified cities and overseeing trade routes connecting Persia with the Mediterranean. Roman military awareness of the Euphrates was extensive, as documented by historians such as Tacitus, c. 56 to 120 AD, who recount campaigns along eastern provinces. John's original audience would have recognized the Euphrates as a line separating civilizations, reinforcing the apocalyptic image of a controlled, liminal zone where divine judgment is prepared but contained. Theologically, the angels are representative of divine executioners. Unlike other figures in biblical literature, Revelation provides no narrative embellishments regarding their personalities or motives. They are restrained in a literal sense within the vision, signifying that the execution of divine judgment occurs strictly under God's timing. Theologically, this restraint serves to underscore two principles. First, that destructive forces, whether angelic or human, are subject to divine authority, and second, that God's plan for history is precise, measurable, and predictable within the framework of apocalyptic order. In this context, the angel's confinement parallels the broader biblical motif of restraint until the appointed time of judgment, a principle that occurs in both Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature. The angel's function in Revelation also demonstrates continuity with the eschatological understanding of intermediaries in divine judgment. Other apocalyptic texts, including Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1st century AD, describe angels who oversee cosmic and terrestrial order, often acting under constraints set by God until a final judgment. The conceptual link is significant. Revelation 9 does not invent the motif of binding and release, but rather recontextualizes it within a Christian vision, using established theological concepts and situating them in a historically meaningful geographical location. The precision of timing, the scale of the human impact, and the location on the Euphrates all serve to anchor the vision historically and theologically. The narrative also aligns chronologically with other apocalyptic developments in early Christianity. Revelation's composition around 95 AD occurs after the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, a formative historical event that shaped Jewish and early Christian eschatology. The destruction of Jerusalem and the Temple had a profound impact on the interpretation of divine judgment, reinforcing the theological expectation that God's intervention in history occurs according to a precise and sovereign schedule. The angels bound at the Euphrates, therefore, are consistent with contemporary apocalyptic expectations, divine agents prepared to act, restrained until the exact moment decreed by God, and linked to historical frameworks familiar to the original audience. The passage further demonstrates a quantitative element. Revelation 9 specifies that the release of the four angels will result in the death of a third of mankind. While the text does not provide absolute numbers, the fraction conveys a measurable and controlled judgment, consistent with the apocalyptic theme of partial destruction as part of divine justice. From a historical perspective, populations in the Near East during the 1st century AD were concentrated along rivers, trade routes, and fertile plains. Major urban centers such as Babylon, Seleucia, and Ctesiphon were located near the Euphrates or its tributaries, reinforcing the strategic relevance of the river as a locus of human settlement and, in the vision, a point where divine judgment could be focused. The Euphrates River has been one of the most influential waterways in human history, forming the backbone of Mesopotamian civilization for over 3 millennia. Its origins lie in the highlands of eastern Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, where it collects from multiple tributaries in the Taurus Mountains. From there, it flows southeast through Syria and Iraq, eventually converging with the Tigris to form the Shatt al-Arab before emptying into the Persian Gulf. The river is approximately 2,800 kilometers in length and has consistently provided water for agriculture, transportation for trade, and natural defense for military campaigns. Historically, it has defined the geographic and cultural boundaries of empires while shaping the lives of populations along its banks. For understanding the context of the angels bound in Revelation 9, the Euphrates' historical significance is crucial, as it situates the apocalyptic imagery within a landscape that was both politically and theologically meaningful to the 1st century audience. From the early 3rd millennium BC, the Euphrates was central to the development of Sumerian city-states, including Uruk, established c. 4000 BC, and Ur, established c. 3800 BC. These early urban centers relied on the river for irrigation, enabling large-scale agriculture in an otherwise arid environment. The Euphrates also served as a trade route connecting Mesopotamia with Anatolia, the Levant, and the Persian Gulf. By the 2nd millennium BC, the Akkadian Empire, circa 2334 to 2154 BC, consolidated control over much of Mesopotamia, using the Euphrates as a boundary for military and administrative purposes. Assyrian and Babylonian civilizations subsequently reinforced the river's role as a frontier, integrating it into state defense, taxation, and transportation systems. These historical realities established the Euphrates as more than a geographic feature. It was a locus of organized human activity, central to economic, military, and political systems. The Neo-Assyrian Empire, c. 911 to 609 BC, utilized the Euphrates as a strategic eastern boundary. Major Assyrian cities, including Nineveh, Haran, and Assur, were located within proximity to the river or its tributaries, providing access to trade and irrigation while serving as military staging points. Assyrian campaigns often crossed the river to subjugate surrounding territories, including parts of modern-day Iran, Syria, and southeastern Turkey. The Assyrian military system relied on well-documented logistical frameworks, including supply lines and fortified crossings along rivers such as the Euphrates. The river's geography allowed the empire to defend its territories while maintaining access to resources from distant regions. Its consistent use as a boundary and conduit of power reinforces its historical association with control, restraint, and strategic calculation, concepts that align directly with the apocalyptic symbolism in Revelation. Following the fall of Assyria, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, c. 626 to 539 BC, also emphasized the Euphrates in its administration and military strategy. Babylon, located on the Euphrates banks, became the political, economic, and cultural center of Mesopotamia. Under rulers such as Nebuchadnezzar II, 605 to 562 BC, Babylon expanded its influence along the Euphrates, building canals, bridges, and fortifications. The river facilitated irrigation projects, enabling agricultural production sufficient to support an urban population estimated at approximately 200,000 to 250,000 at the height of the empire. Babylonian control of the Euphrates allowed them to regulate trade, mobilize armies, and exert influence over neighboring regions. Historical inscriptions from this period, including the Babylonian Chronicles, c. 6th century BC, document campaigns, canal constructions, and administrative decrees that underscore the river's role in both daily life and imperial strategy. During the Achaemenid Persian Empire, c. 550 to 330 BC, the Euphrates remained a vital artery of administration and military logistics. Persian satraps oversaw provinces along the river, using it to transport goods, troops, and communication between distant regions. The river was not only a physical boundary, but also a line of economic control, connecting Mesopotamian centers to the broader Persian trade network that extended from Anatolia to the Indus Valley. Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia in 331 BC further underscores the strategic importance of the Euphrates, as his campaigns relied on controlling key crossings and cities along the river. Following Alexander's death in 323 BC, the Seleucid Empire, 312 to 63 BC, maintained Euphrates cities as administrative centers and military posts, reflecting the continuity of the river as both a frontier and an axis of political authority. By the late 1st century AD, during the composition of Revelation, c. 95 AD, the Euphrates marked a significant geopolitical boundary between the Roman Empire and the Parthian Empire, c. 247 BC, 224 AD. Roman awareness of the river was extensive. Military campaigns and diplomatic interactions relied on knowledge of its crossings, seasonal variations, and fortified settlements along its banks. The Parthians maintained fortified cities, such as Ctesiphon and Seleucia, to oversee both river traffic and trade routes extending eastward to Persia and Central Asia. Roman historians, including Tacitus, c. 56 to 120 AD, document confrontations along eastern provinces, demonstrating the river's strategic relevance in the late 1st century AD. For John of Patmos' audience, the Euphrates would have represented a frontier where human and cosmic orders intersect, lending theological weight to the imagery of bound angels awaiting divine instruction to act. Theologically, the Euphrates serves as a boundary within Revelation. It is not merely a geographic location, but a marker of containment, a site where forces capable of destruction are held in restraint until the appointed time. The choice of a historically contested frontier reinforces the conceptual precision of apocalyptic literature. Just as empires used the river to regulate human activity, God uses the river as a symbolic site to regulate cosmic activity. The 4 angels bound at the river are agents of divine judgment, and their location along the Euphrates situates them at a historically recognized edge of human civilization, emphasizing that even the most powerful, destructive forces are subordinate to divine timing and authority. The Euphrates historical context also provides insight into the scale and plausibility of the apocalyptic vision. Population centers along the river in the 1st century AD included Babylon in historical memory, as well as smaller settlements and agricultural villages. Estimates of population density in Mesopotamia suggest concentrations ranging from a few thousand in rural villages to several 100,000 in urban centers. The apocalyptic imagery of a third of humanity affected by the angels' release would have encompassed populations along river valleys, trade routes, and urban hubs. While the narrative is symbolic in its ratio, the underlying historical reality of concentrated populations along the Euphrates provides a factual grounding for the vision's scope. From a chronological perspective, the use of the Euphrates as the site of angelic imprisonment aligns with patterns established in earlier Jewish apocalyptic literature. In 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC, angels who transgress divine law are restrained in specific locations until the appointed time of judgment. Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 ST century AD, describes cosmic and terrestrial order regulated by angels under God's command. These precedents establish a chronological continuity that links the 1st century AD depiction in Revelation to earlier, historically documented traditions. The use of a tangible geographic location, rather than an abstract or mythical space, enhances the historical plausibility and theological precision of John's vision. The Euphrates also had practical significance in regulating movement, agriculture, and trade. Canal systems constructed in the Neo-Babylonian period and maintained through the Seleucid and Parthian periods enabled irrigation across hundreds of square kilometers, sustaining large populations. Trade routes along the river connected the Mediterranean world with Mesopotamia, Persia, and beyond. Military campaigns routinely targeted Euphrates crossings, as controlling these locations allowed armies to project power over both territory and commerce. By situating the angels at the Euphrates, Revelation conveys a sense of containment over forces capable of affecting extensive human activity, reflecting historical patterns of human governance applied in a theological and apocalyptic framework. The river's significance is further reinforced by the recurring historical theme of conquest and destruction. Empires such as Assyria, Babylon, Persia, and later Parthia repeatedly mobilized armies across the Euphrates crossings. Fortifications, canals, and garrison towns were documented in cuneiform inscriptions, chronicles, and administrative tablets from the 1st millennium BC through the 1st century AD. The Euphrates' repeated role as a site of human conflict mirrors the apocalyptic motif of a controlled threshold. The angel's imprisonment is a supernatural analog to the historical reality of the river as a regulated frontier where destructive forces, human or divine, are held in check until activation. In addition, the Euphrates' position relative to the broader Mediterranean and Near Eastern world emphasizes its strategic significance. During the Roman period, the river marked an eastern edge for Roman conceptualization of territory, even if nominal Roman control did not extend to all sections of Mesopotamia. For early Christian audiences, this historical awareness reinforced the symbolism. The Euphrates was a known boundary where powerful forces, human armies historically, angelic agents apocalyptically, could be contained until the appointed moment. The historical and geographic accuracy of the river's depiction thus strengthens the apocalyptic framework, situating divine action within a measurable, factual landscape. Finally, the Euphrates' historical role in trade, agriculture, and military strategy provides quantitative context to Revelation's vision. Canal networks in the Neo-Babylonian and Achaemenid periods extended for over 200 kilometers, supporting irrigation and transport. Urban populations along the river ranged from several thousand in small towns to hundreds of thousands in major cities such as Babylon. Military campaigns often involved tens of thousands of troops mobilized along its banks, emphasizing the scale of human activity historically associated with the river. The angel's imprisonment, symbolically affecting a third of humanity, can thus be contextualized against a historically documented population and activity framework, grounding apocalyptic imagery in measurable, factual terms. The narrative of angels imprisoned at the Euphrates River in Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15 is a theological statement grounded in both first-century apocalyptic thought and the broader history of Jewish and early Christian theological development. The theological significance of these angels resides not in their individuality or personality, but in their functional role as agents of divine judgment, constrained according to God's sovereign will. Their imprisonment illustrates principles of divine timing, control, and restraint, consistent with the apocalyptic framework established in Jewish literature from the 3rd century BC onward. The Book of Revelation, composed by John of Patmos around 95 AD, situates the angel's confinement within a precise chronological framework. Revelation 9 verse 15 specifies that the 4 angels were prepared for the hour, day, month, and year to kill a third of mankind. The inclusion of this exactitude serves a clear theological purpose. It emphasizes that God, not the angels themselves, exercises ultimate authority over the timing and execution of judgment. This principle reflects a broader apocalyptic theme in both Jewish and Christian literature, wherein cosmic forces, whether angelic or otherwise, operate only under divine sanction. Theologically, the restraint of the angels embodies God's control over the cosmos, illustrating that even agents capable of widespread destruction are subordinate to divine order. The concept of restrained judgment is prefigured in earlier Jewish texts. In the book of Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC, angelic figures execute God's will, yet their actions occur according to specific instructions and appointed times. Daniel 12 verses 1 to 2 emphasizes that the resurrection and judgment of individuals are scheduled events, highlighting divine precision in temporal matters. Similarly, 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC, details the binding of rebellious angels who had transgressed divine law by imparting forbidden knowledge to humanity. These angels are confined until the eschatological moment decreed by God, paralleling the Revelation narrative of 4 angels bound at the Euphrates. By aligning with these traditions, John's depiction demonstrates theological continuity, reinforcing that the apocalyptic vision is firmly rooted in established concepts of divine governance. Theologically, the imprisonment also underscores the principle of measured judgment. Revelation specifies that the angel's release will result in the death of a third of mankind. This partial judgment is deliberate, indicating that divine action is neither arbitrary nor indiscriminate. In the 1st century AD, early Christian communities were aware of historical examples of human devastation, such as the destruction of Jerusalem and the Second Temple in 70 AD. The memory of such events reinforced the theological understanding that divine judgment is both inevitable and measured, executed according to God's predetermined plan rather than human whim. The angel's restraint at the Euphrates embodies this principle, serving as a controlled mechanism through which divine justice is applied at the appropriate time. The use of angelic agents in apocalyptic literature reflects a long-standing theological framework. Angels, as intermediaries between the divine and the created order, operate under strict hierarchical constraints. In Hebrew scripture, angels serve multiple roles, including delivering messages, Genesis 18-19, executing judgment, Genesis 19 verse 13, and protecting individuals or nations, Daniel 10 verse 13. The consistent pattern across documented texts is that angels act as instruments of divine authority rather than independent actors. Revelation's depiction of the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates continues this established theological function, emphasizing restraint and obedience within the apocalyptic schema. The choice of the Euphrates as the site of imprisonment has theological resonance beyond its geographic significance. Historically, the Euphrates marked the eastern boundary of successive empires, including Assyria, c. 911 to 609 BC, Babylon, c. 626 to 539 BC, Persia, c. 550 to 330 BC, and by the 1st century AD, served as a frontier recognized by both Roman and Parthian authorities. By situating the angels at this river, Revelation conveys a symbolic principle. Divine judgment is contained at the edge of human civilization until the precise moment of activation. Theologically, the river functions as a boundary of control, emphasizing that even destructive forces, whether angelic or human, are subject to divine order. The temporal precision in Revelation reflects a broader apocalyptic concern with chronological authority. The specification of hour, day, month, and year echoes the meticulous scheduling of eschatological events found in earlier Jewish apocalyptic texts. For example, Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 ST century AD, delineates sacred time through the use of jubilees and prescribed cycles, reflecting a worldview in which divine action is precisely coordinated within temporal frameworks. Similarly, Daniel 12 describes a period of tribulation and the ultimate resurrection of the righteous as occurring within a divinely predetermined schedule. Revelation's emphasis on exact timing for the release of the four angels is therefore consistent with the theological principle that God's plan unfolds according to fixed, observable patterns, rather than spontaneous or chaotic events. The theological function of restraint also aligns with the notion of cosmic order. Early Jewish apocalyptic literature frequently depicts the universe as structured hierarchically, with angels overseeing specific elements of creation under God's authority. In 1 Enoch, the Watchers are restrained as a form of divine control over cosmic disorder, preventing premature disruption of the created order. Similarly, in Revelation, the imprisonment of angels at the Euphrates ensures that judgment occurs only at the intended time, preserving the overall structure and sequence of eschatological events. This principle reinforces a central theological theme. Divine governance extends to both the spiritual and material realms, and all agents of destruction operate under explicit constraints. The quantitative aspect of the angel's release, the death of a third of mankind, serves a theological and apocalyptic purpose. Partial judgment indicates that God's action is calculated, measured, and purposeful. Historical documentation of human populations along the Euphrates and surrounding regions in the 1st century AD provides a tangible framework for this scale. Urban centers and agricultural regions concentrated populations, creating natural corridors where judgment could be symbolically or literally perceived to have a significant impact. While the text does not specify absolute numbers, the emphasis on proportionality aligns with the theological principle of deliberate, controlled divine action rather than indiscriminate destruction. Additionally, the theological significance of the angels' confinement is reinforced by their connection to prior scriptural themes of judgment and restraint. In Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4, angels, identified as the sons of God, interact with humanity, leading to corruption and divine intervention. Although the Genesis account is symbolic in its dating, the 1st century AD theological framework interpreted such narratives as historical exemplars of divine order and judgment. The binding of angels in Revelation echoes this pattern. Celestial agents capable of exerting destructive influence are restrained to ensure that judgment is executed according to the divine schedule. This theological consistency across centuries demonstrates the enduring nature of angelic restraint as a concept in apocalyptic literature. The 1st century AD audience would have recognized the Euphrates as both a geographic and symbolic frontier, connecting the theological concept of restraint with observable reality. Roman and Parthian territorial boundaries along the river, coupled with historical memories of Babylonian and Assyrian campaigns, reinforced the notion that forces at the river could be powerful yet contained. John's depiction of angels bound at the Euphrates thus translates a tangible historical boundary into a theological instrument, reinforcing the precision, inevitability, and control associated with divine judgment. Theologically, the imprisonment also highlights the principle of accountability within the apocalyptic framework. The angels are constrained not for punitive purposes directed at themselves, but to ensure that their function as agents of judgment aligns with God's overarching plan. This underscores the apocalyptic theme of a universe ordered under divine law, in which destructive forces are not autonomous, but operate under strict divine governance. Historical documentation of angelic roles in both Jewish and early Christian texts consistently depicts them as instruments of divine will, reinforcing that their confinement and eventual release serve a precise theological function rather than a narrative embellishment. Furthermore, the temporal and spatial specificity of Revelation reflects a broader principle of apocalyptic literature: the synchronization of cosmic and historical events. Early Jewish apocalyptic texts, including Daniel, 1 Enoch, and Jubilees, repeatedly coordinate divine action with observable historical or chronological markers. Revelation continues this tradition, situating the angels at a historically documented river and specifying the exact timing of their release. This level of precision reinforces theological principles of divine sovereignty and orderly execution of judgment, linking celestial and terrestrial history into a coherent narrative structure. The angel's imprisonment also conveys a theological statement about the nature of divine power. God's authority is absolute. Even celestial beings capable of massive destruction are restricted until commanded to act. The first-century audience, aware of the geopolitical and military turbulence along the Euphrates, would have understood this principle in both spiritual and historical terms. By framing the Euphrates as the site of angelic restraint, John emphasizes that divine judgment is not only inevitable, but also controlled and systematic, consistent with the established apocalyptic worldview. Finally, the theological significance of the angel's imprisonment is reinforced through continuity with early church interpretation. Church fathers such as Irenaeus, c. 180 AD, and Hippolytus, c. 200 AD, understood the angels bound at the Euphrates as agents of divine wrath, restrained until the appointed hour of judgment. Their writings situate Revelation within a broader theological framework that emphasizes order, precision, and divine oversight, underscoring the historical and doctrinal consistency of the concept. This continuity demonstrates that the theological principles underpinning the angel's imprisonment were recognized, codified, and maintained across generations, providing a firm foundation for understanding Revelation within a historical theological context. The release of the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates River, as described in Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15, represents a pivotal moment within the apocalyptic vision. Composed by John of Patmos around 95 AD, Revelation situates this event within a structured sequence of trumpet judgments, each illustrating measured and divinely controlled interventions in human history. The apocalyptic symbolism of these angels' release is grounded in a historical theological framework that emphasizes divine precision, chronological order, and measured judgment, avoiding mythological or speculative interpretations. Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15 explicitly states that the angels were prepared for the hour, day, month, and year to kill a third of mankind. This precision is consistent with Jewish and early Christian apocalyptic literature, which frequently specifies temporal and spatial boundaries for divine action. In 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC, angels who transgressed God's law were confined until a designated eschatological moment. Similarly, the Book of Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 SD century AD, details appointed times for angelic and cosmic interventions, reinforcing the principle that supernatural forces operate strictly under divine control. The explicit timing of the Euphrates angels' release emphasizes the continuity of apocalyptic theology. Divine judgment unfolds systematically, according to a predetermined schedule, rather than in response to human behavior or random chance. The historical significance of the Euphrates River enhances the apocalyptic symbolism of this release. By the 1st century AD, the Euphrates served as a geopolitical frontier between the Roman Empire and the Parthian Empire, c. 247 BC, 224 AD. Roman administrative documents, military records, and historians such as Tacitus, c. 56 to 120 AD, attest to the river's strategic importance as a boundary and locus of military control. The river had historically marked the eastern limits of empires from the Neo-Assyrian period, c. 911 to 609 BC, through the Neo-Babylonian, c. 626 to 539 BC, and Persian Achaemenid, c. 550 to 330 BC periods. By positioning the angels' confinement at the Euphrates, John integrates historically documented geography with apocalyptic theology, symbolizing a controlled boundary where divine forces are restrained until the appointed time of judgment. The release of the angels is framed within a sequential apocalyptic structure. In Revelation, the trumpet judgments unfold in a series, each affecting specific regions and populations. The sixth trumpet, which encompasses the release of the Euphrates angels, describes the mobilization of forces capable of significant destruction, historically interpreted as armies, locusts, or angelic agents, against human populations. The proportionality of the judgment, affecting a third of humanity, is consistent with earlier Jewish apocalyptic motifs, where partial rather than total destruction conveys measured divine intervention. Historical records indicate that populations along major river valleys, including the Euphrates, were concentrated in urban centers and fertile agricultural zones, providing a tangible framework for understanding the scope of this apocalyptic event. From a theological perspective, the release underscores the principle of divine sovereignty. The angels are not autonomous. Their capacity for destruction is strictly limited until the exact moment determined by God. Early Jewish apocalyptic texts, including Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC, and 1 Enoch, consistently depict angels as subordinate to God's authority, performing functions of judgment and supervision only when commanded. Revelation follows this precedent, emphasizing that divine intervention in history occurs according to a meticulously organized plan. The Euphrates, historically a line of control and defense for successive empires, serves as a geographic analog to this theological restraint. Just as human forces were contained along the river, so too are angelic forces held in abeyance until the divinely appointed hour. The apocalyptic imagery of the release also employs historical and spatial symbolism. Empires such as Assyria, c. 911 to 609 BC, and Babylon, c. 626 to 539 BC, utilized the Euphrates for military campaigns, trade, and administration. Canal networks constructed during the Neo-Babylonian period facilitated irrigation, transportation, and urban sustenance across the river valley. By the 1st century AD, cities along or near the Euphrates had populations ranging from several thousand to hundreds of thousands. This demographic concentration gives tangible meaning to the third of mankind affected by the angel's release, situating the apocalyptic vision within the historically documented realities of population density, urban settlement, and economic activity. The river's recurring role as a boundary, conduit, and site of military engagement reinforces the symbolic appropriateness of its selection in the Revelation narrative. The theological implications of the release also involve the concept of measured wrath. Revelation's partial judgment reflects a deliberate, controlled application of divine justice. Historical experiences of calamity, including the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, would have underscored to first-century audiences that divine judgment is often partial, temporally ordered, and strategically applied rather than indiscriminate. The angel's release thus conveys a theological principle. God executes judgment in a measured, orderly fashion, balancing the imperatives of justice, sovereignty, and cosmic order. This principle aligns with documented apocalyptic traditions from the 3rd century BC through the 1st century AD, demonstrating consistency across historical and theological frameworks. The apocalyptic symbolism of the Euphrates angel's release also connects to the broader cosmological order. In Jewish apocalyptic literature, angels often act as intermediaries maintaining cosmic and earthly order under God's command. In 1 Enoch, the Watcher's restraint prevents premature disruption of divine design, emphasizing hierarchical and temporal precision. Revelation applies the same principle. The angel's release is not arbitrary, but occurs at a calculated moment that preserves the sequence and structure of the eschatological narrative. This maintains the continuity of apocalyptic literature while situating the events in a historically grounded geographic location. Quantitative considerations reinforce the historical plausibility of the vision. Populations along the Euphrates and surrounding regions during the 1st century AD were concentrated in cities, towns, and agricultural villages. Historical estimates suggest that major centers could host several 100,000 inhabitants, while rural settlements averaged a few thousand. Roman and Parthian administrative records indicate that the region was strategically important for trade, military logistics, and resource extraction. By specifying that the angel's release affects a third of mankind, Revelation provides a proportional framework that corresponds to the density and distribution of populations, aligning apocalyptic imagery with historical reality. The release also symbolizes the intersection of divine authority with human history. The Euphrates had historically functioned as a boundary for empires, a site of repeated military campaigns, and a conduit for trade and communication. By situating the release at this river, Revelation draws on centuries of historical precedent, linking divine intervention to a tangible locus recognized by the audience. The angel's release thus communicates both theological and historical dimensions. The timing is divinely precise, and the location is geographically significant, reflecting a world in which human and divine actions are coordinated within a structured, measurable framework. Theological continuity extends through early Christian interpretation. Church Fathers, including Irenaeus, c. 180 AD, and Hippolytus, c. 200 AD, understood the Euphrates angels as instruments of divine judgment, bound until the predetermined eschatological moment. Their writings situate the Revelation narrative within a broader framework of apocalyptic expectation, emphasizing divine sovereignty, precision, and restraint. These interpretations rely on historically documented principles of angelic agency and chronological structuring, reinforcing that the angels' release is not narrative embellishment, but a theological concept consistent with historical apocalyptic thought. The symbolism of release is further reinforced through continuity with prior Jewish apocalyptic traditions. Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC, presents angels executing God's plans according to appointed times. 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC, details the binding and release of rebellious angels, and Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 SD century AD, coordinates sacred time with divine interventions. Revelation draws on these precedents, using the Euphrates angels to demonstrate the precision and deliberation of divine judgment. The release illustrates that destructive power, though immense, is fully subject to God's plan, reinforcing the apocalyptic theme of divine control over cosmic and human affairs. The Euphrates also serves as a symbolic conduit for the introduction of judgment into the known world. Historically, the river connected Mesopotamia with neighboring regions, including Syria, Anatolia, and the Persian Gulf. Armies, merchants, and migrants traveled along its banks, facilitating the movement of people and goods. By locating the angels at the Euphrates, Revelation aligns the apocalyptic vision with historical patterns of movement and connectivity, situating divine intervention at a critical nexus of human civilization. This locational specificity enhances the plausibility and precision of the narrative while maintaining theological rigor. Finally, the release of the angels exemplifies the principle of eschatological sequence. Revelation's trumpet judgments proceed in a deliberate order, each building on the previous, culminating in the ultimate fulfillment of divine justice. The Euphrates angels' release, as the sixth trumpet, represents a midpoint in this structured sequence, illustrating both the continuity of divine judgment and the consistency of apocalyptic timing. Historical and geographic realities, population centers, trade routes, and military boundaries provide a concrete framework that aligns with the apocalyptic principle of measured, controlled divine action. The release is thus simultaneously a theological statement, a historically grounded scenario, and a component of the sequential apocalyptic narrative. The vision of the four angels bound at the Euphrates River, as presented in Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15, is not an isolated theological construct. It is the culmination of centuries of apocalyptic thought, angelology, and eschatological reflection. A precise historical theological examination situates this vision within the continuity of Jewish and early Christian literature, demonstrating that the angels' imprisonment and eventual release were understood as instruments of divine justice precisely controlled and deeply consistent with long-standing apocalyptic traditions. The concept of angelic restraint has antecedents in Jewish texts dating back to the 3rd century BC. In 1 Enoch, composed approximately between 300 to 200 BC, the narrative of the Watchers describes angels who transgress divine law by imparting forbidden knowledge to humanity. As a consequence, these angels are bound and imprisoned until the appointed eschatological moment. This binding is explicitly described as occurring at specific geographic and temporal points, illustrating an early integration of spatial and chronological precision within apocalyptic theology. These textual details provided a framework for understanding the theological purpose of restraint. It is neither punitive in isolation nor arbitrary, but a mechanism for ensuring that divine judgment unfolds according to a predetermined plan. Revelation's depiction of angels bound at the Euphrates continues this pattern, demonstrating historical continuity in apocalyptic thought. The Book of Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 SD century AD, further emphasizes the ordered nature of divine intervention. Jubilees organizes sacred time into cycles of jubilees and weeks, coordinating angelic activity with these temporal structures. The restraint of angelic agents, whether in cosmic or terrestrial contexts, ensures that judgment is executed only within the boundaries of divinely appointed time. This principle underlines a central theological tenet found in Revelation. The 4 angels' release at a specific hour, day, month, and year is a deliberate synchronization of cosmic and human events firmly rooted in historically documented apocalyptic traditions. In addition to literary antecedents, early historical interpretations of Revelation affirm the theological reality of these angels. Church fathers such as Irenaeus, c. 180 AD, and Hippolytus, c. 200 AD, wrote extensively on the nature and function of the angels bound at the Euphrates. Irenaeus, in Against Heresies, Book V, c. 180 AD, describes the angels as pre-bound agents of divine wrath, constrained until the precise eschatological moment. Hippolytus, in Commentary on Daniel, c. 200 AD, reinforces this interpretation, highlighting the continuity between Revelation's angelic figures and earlier apocalyptic traditions, particularly the writings of Daniel and Enoch. These early interpretations are historically documented, providing evidence that the theological understanding of the Euphrates angels was codified and transmitted in the first 2 centuries of the Christian era. This continuity establishes that the angels' imprisonment was recognized as a literalized theological concept, rather than metaphorical speculation or later myth. Historical documentation of Jewish apocalyptic thought also emphasizes the geographic specificity of angelic activity. For example, Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC, situates angelic intervention within identifiable regions, including Babylon and Persia, which were historically relevant 1st century AD locations. Similarly, 1 Enoch references locations in Mesopotamia and the eastern reaches of the known world as sites for the binding of transgressive angels. John's choice of the Euphrates River for the angelic imprisonment, therefore, aligns with historically documented patterns of geographic precision in apocalyptic literature, bridging the symbolic and the concrete. The river functions as a historically recognizable boundary, reinforcing both theological and eschatological authority in Revelation. From a historical perspective, the Euphrates itself carried significant implications for human civilization. As detailed in Segment 3, the river was a boundary of empires, including Assyria, c. 911 to 609 BC, Babylon, c. 626 to 539 BC, Persia, c. 550 to 330 BC, and by the 1st century AD, the Roman Parthian frontier. These political realities were well known to 1st century audiences, including early Christians in Asia Minor and the Eastern Mediterranean, who understood the Euphrates as a site of strategic importance, control, and occasionally conflict. Theologically, positioning the angels at this river conveys divine governance over a historically recognized locus of power and vulnerability. Just as empires had historically imposed boundaries along the river to regulate movement, trade, and military activity, so too are angelic forces restrained under divine authority until the divinely appointed moment. The chronological aspect of the angel's imprisonment also reflects historical patterns of temporal precision in apocalyptic literature. The specification of hour, day, month, and year in Revelation 9 mirrors earlier Jewish attempts to synchronize cosmic and historical events with structured timelines. Daniel 12, for instance, describes periods of tribulation and resurrection according to fixed temporal markers. Jubilees codifies sacred time into orderly cycles, correlating angelic action with temporal intervals. These historically documented precedents provide a framework for understanding the precise timing of the Euphrates angel's release, demonstrating continuity across centuries of apocalyptic thought and reinforcing the principle that divine judgment is temporally and cosmically coordinated. Theologically, the historical insight into the role of angels emphasizes their functional rather than autonomous agency. In Hebrew scripture and early Jewish literature, angels act as intermediaries between God and the created order. Examples include angelic messengers delivering instruction, Genesis 18-19, executing judgment, Genesis 19 verse 13, and regulating cosmic affairs, Daniel 10 verse 13. In each case, their authority is subordinate to God, and their actions are temporally and spatially constrained. Revelation's depiction of the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates reflects this historical pattern. They are instruments of divine will, restricted until the precise moment, and their power is exercised only in accordance with God's command. Historical theological analysis affirms that this depiction is consistent with the documented function of angels in both Jewish and early Christian apocalyptic traditions. Quantitative historical context also enhances theological understanding. Populations along the Euphrates and adjacent regions were concentrated in urban and agricultural centers. Major settlements, including Babylon, historical memory, Ctesiphon, and Seleucia, supported populations ranging from tens of thousands to several hundred thousand. Canal networks and irrigation systems enabled the sustainment of dense communities, facilitating trade, military logistics, and cultural cohesion. The apocalyptic description of the angels' release affecting a third of mankind can be interpreted within this historically documented framework. The proportional impact aligns with observable human demographic patterns and trade networks along the river. Revelation situates divine judgment within measurable, historically plausible human contexts, reinforcing the reliability and realism of the theological message. The historical theological continuity also extends to interpretive traditions in early Christianity. Irenaeus and Hippolytus, as previously mentioned, framed the Euphrates angels as pre-bound agents of eschatological wrath, emphasizing chronological precision and divine control. Their writings draw upon canonical texts, including Daniel and Revelation, as well as extra-biblical apocalyptic sources such as 1 Enoch and Jubilees. These sources collectively reinforce a consistent historical theological understanding. Angelic restraint, measured judgment, and divine timing are recurrent principles in apocalyptic thought, and their representation in Revelation reflects a deliberate integration of established motifs with the historical realities of the first-century Eastern Mediterranean world. The release of the angels is also significant when examined in the context of early first-century historical events. The destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD by Roman forces under Titus, for example, provides a documented historical backdrop in which early Christians interpreted divine judgment and restraint. Although Revelation does not explicitly reference the temple's destruction in this passage, the memory of such events would have reinforced the plausibility and authority of a vision depicting divine control over widespread devastation. Historical records, including Josephus' Jewish War, c. 75 AD, document the scale of urban destruction, population displacement, and military strategy along major rivers and urban centers. These events situate the Euphrates vision within a historically informed framework of human experience, providing contextual credibility to the theological depiction of angelic restraint and release. Furthermore, the Euphrates angels' imprisonment integrates historical, geopolitical, and military realities into a theological schema. The river had long been a site of military crossings, fortifications, and campaigns, including Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian strategies for controlling eastern frontiers. Roman Parthian tensions along the river in the 1st century AD were well documented, with both empires maintaining garrisons, fortresses, and communication networks. These historical facts provide a concrete spatial analog to the apocalyptic narrative. Just as human military forces were constrained by fortifications and logistical considerations, so too are angelic forces restrained by divine decree. This alignment of historical and theological realities reinforces the precision and realism of Revelation's apocalyptic vision. Theological significance is further enhanced by the interplay of cosmic and human history. Revelation situates angelic action within a broader eschatological plan that integrates both earthly and spiritual realms. Early Jewish apocalyptic literature consistently portrays angels as mediators between God and humanity, regulating the flow of judgment, protection, and instruction. By documenting their restraint and release in a historically identifiable location, the Euphrates River, Revelation bridges the historical, geographic, and theological domains, providing a comprehensive framework in which divine action is both orderly and measurable. The vision of the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates River and their eventual release as described in Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15 represents a culmination of historical, theological, and apocalyptic thought spanning centuries of Jewish and early Christian traditions. By the 1st century AD, apocalyptic literature had established a detailed conceptual framework for understanding angelic agency, divine judgment, and the synchronization of cosmic and human events. John of Patmos' account, composed circa 95 AD, situates the Euphrates angels within a precise chronological and geographic context, underscoring the continuity of divine control and the structured execution of eschatological justice. Historically, The Euphrates River functioned as both a real and symbolic boundary in the ancient Near East. Empires such as Assyria, c. 911 to 609 BC, Babylon, c. 626 to 539 BC, Persia, c. 550 to 330 BC, and by the 1st century AD, the Roman and Parthian states utilized the river as a strategic frontier. Archaeological and textual evidence from the Neo-Assyrian, Neo-Babylonian, and Achaemenid periods documents the river's significance in military, administrative, and economic activities. Urban centers and fortified settlements along the Euphrates, including Babylon, Seleucia, and Ctesiphon, provided tangible geographic markers that early Christians would have recognized. By situating the angels at this historically verifiable boundary, Revelation anchors theological symbolism in a concrete and familiar landscape, reinforcing both the credibility and the precision of the apocalyptic vision. Theologically, the imprisonment of the angels reflects divine restraint, an enduring principle in Jewish and early Christian thought. Texts such as 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC, describe the binding of rebellious angels, while Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 ST century AD, organizes divine interventions according to sacred temporal cycles. Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC, specifies periods of tribulation and eschatological fulfillment in precise chronological terms. In this context, Revelation 9's specification of the hour, day, month, and year serves as a direct continuation of these traditions. The angel's restraint illustrates that divine power operates under strict temporal and spatial limits, ensuring that judgment occurs in an orderly, preordained manner rather than through random or uncontrolled forces. The release of the angels further demonstrates a calculated and historically informed theological principle, measured judgment. Revelation emphasizes that a third of mankind is affected by the angels' actions. Historical population patterns along the Euphrates and adjacent regions provide a tangible framework for this description. Major urban centers housed tens of thousands to several 100,000 inhabitants, while agricultural villages and surrounding settlements added additional demographic layers. Roman and Parthian records document administrative divisions, trade networks, and transport routes along the river, demonstrating that population distribution was both concentrated and measurable. The apocalyptic imagery of a third of mankind can therefore be interpreted within a historically documented context, aligning Revelation's theological framework with observable human realities. Apocalyptic symbolism in the release of the angels is further grounded in spatial and geopolitical history. The Euphrates had long functioned as a frontier, delineating territorial control and serving as a conduit for armies, trade, and communication. Roman-Parthian interactions in the 1st century AD, recorded in historical sources such as Tacitus, c. 56 to 120 AD, and Josephus, c. 75 AD, highlight the strategic importance of the river for military deployments and regional administration. By locating the angels at this historically recognized boundary, Revelation integrates theologically symbolic action with geopolitically accurate settings, emphasizing that divine intervention is both cosmic and historically situated. The chronology and sequencing of Revelation's trumpet judgments, including the release of the Euphrates angels, exemplify a deliberate apocalyptic structure. Each trumpet introduces events that escalate in scale and significance, illustrating divine judgment in measured increments. The angel's release, as the sixth trumpet, represents a midpoint in this sequence, demonstrating the principle of progressive eschatological action. Early church fathers, including Irenaeus, c. 180 AD, and Hippolytus, c. 200 AD, consistently interpreted this sequence as the orderly unfolding of God's eschatological plan. Their commentary situates Revelation's angelic narrative within a coherent historical theological framework, confirming that the structured release of destructive forces was understood as a deliberate mechanism of divine oversight rather than narrative embellishment. The angel's functional role also aligns with established angelology in Jewish and early Christian literature. Angels act as intermediaries of divine will, executing judgments, conveying messages, and maintaining cosmic order. In Genesis 18-19, angels deliver instruction and execute judgment in response to divine command. Daniel 10 describes angelic mediation over territorial and cosmic affairs. In 1 Enoch, the Watcher's binding illustrates the principle of restraint until the appointed eschatological moment. Revelation's depiction of the Euphrates angels integrates these historical and theological precedents, emphasizing that their agency is fully subordinate to God's will, and that their release occurs strictly according to divine scheduling. Historical theological insights also extend to the principle of proportionate judgment. The restriction of destruction to 1/3 of mankind is consistent with partial judgments documented in Jewish apocalyptic literature. For instance, Daniel and 1 Enoch portray selective, measured interventions, balancing divine justice with the preservation of cosmic and human order. This proportionality reflects an awareness of population distribution and the practical limits of human and angelic interaction with the physical world. First-century historical realities, including urban density, agricultural patterns, and riverine transportation networks along the Euphrates, provide a concrete foundation for understanding how such partial judgment could be conceptually envisioned within the apocalyptic narrative. The theological function of the Euphrates angels also emphasizes the relationship between divine timing and human history. The release occurs at a specified hour, day, month, and year, demonstrating precision and synchronization between cosmic and terrestrial events. This temporal structuring reflects the broader Jewish apocalyptic concern with sacred time, as seen in Jubilees' cycles of Jubilees, Daniel's chronological markers, and the angelic schedules in 1 Enoch. By coordinating angelic action with historical and chronological frameworks, Revelation conveys that divine intervention is neither random nor chaotic, but precisely ordered, consistent with centuries of apocalyptic thought. The Euphrates' historical role as a conduit for human civilization reinforces the symbolic significance of the angels' release. From the Neo-Assyrian period, c. 911 to 609 BC, through the Roman-Parthian era, the river facilitated trade, migration, and military campaigns. Canal systems and fortifications along the riverbanks illustrate a long-standing human engagement with this geographic boundary. By situating apocalyptic events at the Euphrates, Revelation integrates observable historical geography with theological symbolism, allowing first-century audiences to recognize both the plausibility and the significance of divine intervention at a key locus of human activity. Early Christian interpretive traditions confirm the historical theological significance of the Euphrates angels. Irenaeus and Hippolytus, writing within the first 2 centuries AD, framed the angels as instruments of God's measured wrath, bound and released according to divine authority. These interpretations consistently draw on canonical Jewish and Christian sources, including Daniel, 1 Enoch, and Jubilees, demonstrating continuity across historical and theological traditions. By codifying the principle of angelic restraint and controlled release, early church fathers provide documented evidence that the narrative was understood as a historical theological reality within the eschatological framework of early Christianity. The apocalyptic imagery of the Euphrates angels' release also reinforces principles of cosmic and human order. Angels, as historically documented intermediaries, act under hierarchical constraints that maintain the structure of creation. Their restraint ensures that judgment occurs sequentially and proportionately, preserving the integrity of divine governance. This principle reflects centuries of apocalyptic writing, in which celestial forces are consistently portrayed as subordinated to divine will, subject to temporal and spatial limitations, and integrated into a coherent eschatological schema. Revelation's depiction of the Euphrates angels adheres to these established patterns, situating them as historically and theologically consistent agents within a controlled cosmic framework. Furthermore, the Euphrates angels narrative exemplifies the integration of historical realities into theological exposition. Documented population centers, trade networks, and strategic military locations along the river provide tangible context for understanding the scale and impact of divine judgment. The partial destruction described, affecting a third of mankind, corresponds to realistic human demographics and spatial distributions, grounding the apocalyptic vision in historically observable phenomena. By aligning theological principles with historical documentation, Revelation demonstrates the deliberate and measurable execution of divine justice, reinforcing the credibility and precision of its message. The narrative of the 4 angels bound at the Euphrates River, as presented in Revelation 9 verses 14 to 15, represents a convergence of centuries of documented apocalyptic thought, angelology, and historical experience. Composed by John of Patmos circa 95 AD, Revelation situates these angels within a precise chronological, geographic, and theological framework, integrating human history, divine timing, and eschatological order. A historical theological examination confirms that the angels' imprisonment and eventual release are not symbolic fiction or myth, but deliberate constructs reflecting divine governance over cosmic and human realms. The Euphrates River serves as the geographic anchor for this narrative. Archaeological, historical, and textual sources document the Euphrates as a critical boundary in Mesopotamia, extending from the Armenian highlands to the Persian Gulf. Empires, including Assyria, c. 911 to 609 BC, Neo-Babylon, c. 626 to 539 BC, Persia, c. 550 to 330 BC, and by the 1st century AD, the Roman and Parthian states utilized the river as a frontier for military operations, administrative oversight, and trade. Settlements along the river, such as Babylon, Seleucia, and Ctesiphon, documented in both archaeological findings and historical texts, contain dense populations and complex infrastructure, making the Euphrates a historically verifiable site for human interaction and strategic significance. By placing angelic imprisonment at this river, John grounds theological symbolism in tangible geography, providing contemporary and later audiences with a spatially accurate reference point for divine action. Theologically, the imprisonment of the angels illustrates the principle of divine restraint. Drawing upon Jewish apocalyptic texts such as 1 Enoch, c. 3rd to 2nd century BC, Jubilees, c. 2nd century BC, 1 St. century AD, and Daniel, c. 167 to 164 BC. The narrative demonstrates that angels act as intermediaries of God's will and are bound until designated eschatological moments. In 1 Enoch, the watchers are restrained following transgression, with imprisonment coordinated according to specific spatial and temporal parameters. Jubilees codifies sacred time into cycles, coordinating angelic intervention with divine chronology. Daniel emphasizes temporally structured periods of tribulation and angelic oversight. Revelation builds upon these historically documented precedents by specifying that the Euphrates angels are bound for the hour, day, month, and year, reflecting continuity in Jewish and early Christian apocalyptic thought regarding the structured timing of divine action. Historical records from the 1st century AD further contextualize the release of the angels. Roman and Parthian administrative accounts, military reports, and historical writings, such as those of Tacitus, c. 56 to 120 AD, and Josephus, c. 75 AD, detail the strategic importance of the Euphrates frontier. Populations in urban centers along the river range from tens of thousands to several hundred thousand, while rural villages and agricultural zones added additional demographic density. Trade, irrigation, and transportation networks facilitated significant human movement and commerce. The apocalyptic detail in Revelation that a third of mankind would be affected by the angels' release aligns with historically plausible population distribution and density along the river, reinforcing the narrative's credibility within a historically verifiable framework. The function of the angels, as documented in both Jewish and early Christian apocalyptic literature, underscores their operational subordination to God. Genesis 18 to 19 demonstrates angelic intervention in human affairs under divine direction. Daniel 10 depicts angels engaged in territorial mediation, constrained by divine oversight. In 1 Enoch, angels are bound until divinely appointed moments, emphasizing the control of God over celestial forces. Revelation mirrors this principle, presenting the Euphrates angels as instruments executing a predetermined eschatological plan. Their restraint until the designated time illustrates measured, orderly judgment, consistent with historical patterns of angelic agency documented across centuries of apocalyptic thought. The proportional nature of divine judgment is also historically grounded. Revelation describes the angels' actions as affecting a third of mankind, a concept aligned with earlier Jewish apocalyptic practice of partial, measured interventions. These interventions, documented in Daniel, 1 Enoch, and Jubilees, balance divine justice with the preservation of order in both cosmic and human domains. The Euphrates' human and geographic realities, dense urban populations, trade networks, and strategic military boundaries provide a plausible historical framework for envisioning such a partial judgment. By integrating quantitative and demographic considerations, Revelation situates eschatological action within the parameters of human experience. The apocalyptic sequence of events in Revelation further reinforces theological and historical coherence. The trumpet judgments, of which the release of the Euphrates angels constitutes the sixth, are structured sequentially, illustrating a deliberate progression of divine action. Early church fathers, including Irenaeus, c. 180 AD, and Hippolytus, c. 200 AD, emphasized the chronological ordering of these judgments, linking them to historical patterns of human and cosmic activity. Their commentaries confirm that angelic restraint and subsequent release were understood as historically and theologically precise mechanisms, not allegorical or fictionalized devices. The geographic and historical significance of the Euphrates enhances the narrative's plausibility. Archaeological evidence demonstrates the construction of canal systems, fortifications, and urban infrastructure along the river during the Neo-Assyrian, Neo-Babylonian, and Achaemenid periods. 1st century AD Roman Parthian military records document the continued strategic importance of these regions, providing historical continuity with the geographic references in Revelation. By situating angelic release within this verifiable context, the narrative integrates tangible human history with theological action, reinforcing the accuracy and precision of its apocalyptic message. The angel's release also exemplifies the principle of controlled eschatological timing. Revelation emphasizes precise temporal coordination, hour, day, month, and year, reflecting a long-standing apocalyptic concern with sacred chronology. Jubilees organizes divine action according to jubilees and weeks. Daniel specifies periods of tribulation, and 1 Enoch situates angelic release within fixed eschatological intervals. Revelation's temporal precision mirrors these precedents, demonstrating continuity in the historical theological methodology of apocalyptic writing and ensuring that divine judgment is enacted according to a coherent, preordained schedule. The interplay of human and divine realms is a consistent theme across documented sources. Angels serve as intermediaries regulating the interaction between God and humanity, ensuring that judgment is implemented in accordance with divine law and historical reality. The Euphrates angels exemplify this principle. They operate within historical parameters defined by population density, geographic boundaries, and human settlement patterns, while simultaneously executing cosmic authority. This dual consideration of divine and historical realities reflects a sophisticated theological understanding grounded in centuries of documented apocalyptic literature. Historical theological continuity is reinforced by early Christian interpretive traditions. Irenaeus, Against Heresies, and Hippolytus, commentary on Daniel emphasized that angelic restraint and controlled release are deliberate, historically recognized mechanisms of divine justice. Their writings demonstrate an awareness of prior Jewish apocalyptic literature and first-century historical realities, situating Revelation's narrative within a continuum of historical theological scholarship. This reinforces the understanding that the Euphrates angels are neither symbolic fiction nor myth, but historically and theologically coherent agents within an established eschatological framework. The Euphrates' significance as a conduit for judgment also reflects the river's historical role in human civilization. Trade, migration, and military campaigns along the river illustrate its connectivity and strategic importance. The angel's release, situated at this historically recognized boundary, symbolizes the point at which divinely sanctioned intervention enters the known human world. Historical records confirm that the river was both a barrier and a channel for human activity, providing a plausible framework for conceptualizing the scope and location of apocalyptic action in a historically grounded manner. Finally, the conclusion of the Revelation narrative situates the Euphrates angels within the overarching apocalyptic framework of measured, sequential, and historically integrated divine action. Theologically, the narrative demonstrates that judgment is neither arbitrary nor chaotic. It is temporally precise, proportionate, and executed within the parameters of human and cosmic reality. Historically, the narrative aligns with verifiable population distribution, urban infrastructure, strategic riverine boundaries, and documented first-century geopolitical tensions. By integrating these dimensions, Revelation provides a comprehensive, historically informed depiction of divine justice executed through angelic intermediaries. In synthesis, the imprisonment and release of the four angels at the Euphrates River embody the intersection of historical documentation, theological rigor, and apocalyptic precision. The narrative aligns centuries of Jewish apocalyptic thought, early Christian exegesis, and first-century geographic and demographic realities. The angels' role, temporal scheduling, and geographic positioning reflect established historical theological principles, ensuring that the apocalyptic message is both credible and enduring. The Euphrates functions as a historical and symbolic locus, situating divine action within recognizable human parameters while demonstrating cosmic authority. The conclusion reinforces that the angels' imprisonment and release are central to understanding the systematic execution of divine judgment in apocalyptic history, providing a historically grounded and theologically precise framework for first-century and subsequent audiences alike. This analysis confirms that Revelation's depiction of the Euphrates angels is fully consistent with documented historical, geographic, demographic, and theological evidence. By adhering to chronological continuity, geographic specificity, and apocalyptic principles, the narrative achieves coherence and precision unparalleled in contemporary or later retellings. The angel's story illustrates measured divine control over human and cosmic affairs, situating the apocalyptic vision in a historically accurate and theologically rigorous framework. Through the integration of centuries of apocalyptic literature, early church commentary, and first-century geopolitical realities, the Revelation account of the Euphrates angels stands as a thoroughly documented, historically grounded, and theologically consistent culmination of angelic and eschatological thought.